Well, it's about time we start asking ourselves, is America actually a culture, and does civilization actually triumph over chaos in this day and age? I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Katie is kicking off today's show with a look at the health of our republic.
It's another day that ends in Y, so it's Donald Trump's fault. Because if anything bad happens, it's Trump's fault. And now the chaos that is Afghanistan, with the government falling to the Taliban and people attempting to flee, that's why the president, not the one named Donald Trump, because Trump isn't president right now, had to blame the former president. Again, the one who isn't president right now. First, though, virtue signaling Joe had to take off that mask in more ways than one.
Good afternoon.
It's not a good afternoon when the President of the United States finally is plucked from his cozy camp life and forced to make a statement because that's just one little part of his job as Commander-in-Chief. Of course, he then promptly blamed Trump for having to withdraw and talked about his diplomacy plan.
We will continue to support the Afghan people. We will lead with our diplomacy, our international influence, and our humanitarian aid. We'll continue to push for regional diplomacy and engagement to prevent violence and instability. We'll continue to speak out for the basic rights of the Afghan people, of women and girls, just as we speak out all over the world. I've been clear, the human rights must be the center of our foreign policy, not the periphery. But the way to do it is not through endless military deployments. It's with our diplomacy, our economic tools, and rallying the world to join us.
Yes, because the one thing the Taliban takes seriously is women's rights. It's our diplomacy, which will get it all back on track. Because we are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's just start giving. Sorry, that was meant for Africa, not the Middle East. But let this sink in for a moment. Joe Biden boasts as a catchphrase that America is back.
America is back. America is back. Diplomacy is back at the center of our foreign policy.
So America is back. And right now in Afghanistan, they now boast that the Taliban is back. And by they, I mean the Taliban boasts that the Taliban is back because Afghan people damn well can't speak. I'll get into the details in a moment. But today's question, what do we do about Afghanistan? This has been a question for about my entire lifetime, and probably much of yours too. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. And here's my weekly plea for you to subscribe to the Healthy Republic page on YouTube. And if you could share this video, that would be helpful too. Now, in case you forgot, we have such wonderful leadership. Immaculate, impeccable. I know this because over the weekend, when the chaos ensued in Afghanistan, our leadership was doing something. The official White House Twitter account tweeted out, "This morning, the president and vice president met with their national security team and senior officials to hear updates on the drawdown of our civilian personnel in Afghanistan, evacuations of SIV applicants and other Afghan allies, and the ongoing security situation in Kabul." Except no one is there but Biden in an empty room. Where in the world is Kama-lama-lama ding-dong? Okay, fine. That may be her in the middle of that Zoom call. But why is Joe Biden all by himself in a room, even on a Zoom call, and not in the White House Situation Room? Well, he's at camp. Camp David. Because camp is where his mom used to send him.
She'd say, you know, Joey, bravery resides in everyone's heart, and someday it will be summoned. And when it is, honey, you've got to step up. Character matters. Integrity matters, Joey.
Step up he did, all the way onto Marine One so he could go to Camp David. Was he out golfing while all of this was happening? Because you know golf is not allowed as president. You must only play basketball. But since it was Biden, he was probably just out wandering. They call him the Wanderer. Yeah, the Wanderer. He roams around. That's President Biden, a man who really did lose his way to his office. And I wish that wasn't so. But that's the reality, folks. I'll say this. No one has been right on Afghanistan for 20 years. So that means Democrats, Republicans, and every damn bureaucrat has not seemed to make it work. And our men and women in uniform have paid ultimate sacrifices for that. They lost lives and limbs to try to keep a foothold there to battle terrorism in both Afghanistan and Iraq. And now Joe Biden just said, "We out." And since we don't teach history anymore, I'll let you all know that this is in fact reminiscent of another time in history when something like this happened. It was April 1975, and Joe Biden was a young senator from Delaware who didn't know much about anything. So not much has changed there. Vietnam was in a bad place. What we now know as Ho Chi Minh City was back then called Saigon. And in April 1975, Saigon fell to the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, thereby ending the attempts at making Vietnam anything but the Socialist Republic of Vietnam that it reunified into. Yet Biden doesn't want to acknowledge the similarities between Saigon 1975 and Kabul 2021.
Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam with some people feeling...
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable. So the question now is, where do they go from here? That the jury is still out. But the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
Exhibit A, please.
In both photographs, taken 46 years apart, U.S. Army Chinook helicopters are visible hovering over U.S. embassy buildings to extract staff in both these cities under siege.
But nothing to see here. At the same July 8th press conference of Joe Biden making a highlight reel of that claim aged not so well, let's watch Biden doing what Biden does.
Very much. Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
So what is the level of confidence that they have that it will not collapse?
The Afghan government and leadership has to come together. They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place.
So well equipped that it completely fell apart faster than a house built out of a deck of cards after someone coughed. And after an act of journalism was committed by the New York Times, it was reported that classified assessments by American spy agencies over the summer painted an increasingly grim picture of the prospect of a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan and warned of the rapid collapse of the Afghan military, even as President Biden and his advisors said publicly that was unlikely to happen as quickly, according to current and former American government officials. So Biden is lying. Again.
I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated.
Thank you, New York Times, for doing your jobs for once and calling out Biden. But you won't get that kind of reporting over at CNN. They're too busy dancing on the graves of the elderly they so happily helped Andrew Cuomo dig. Now, I have to talk over this because the music is copyrighted, but let's just say the music's bumping, and little brother Fredo's dance moves leave a lot to be desired. Disturbing. Meanwhile, NBC decided to peddle the panic porn of the Department of Homeland Security, which laid out a terrorism alert ahead of the anniversary of 9/11. With the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, that would make sense. Except that's not who they say are the terrorists.
Well, DHS says this new terrorism advisory is not based on any actual threats or plots, but it says there's a rise in anti-government rhetoric. Some of it is opposition to COVID public health rules like mask and vaccine measures. Some calls for violent action are based on claims of election fraud or a belief that Donald Trump can be reinstated. And DHS says the coming 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks and religious holidays later this year could be catalysts for violence.
Because in their minds, not wanting to wear a mask is more dangerous than the Taliban. It all comes full circle. It's still Trump's fault. Is it any wonder, then, that Biden's approval ratings not only hit their lowest ever at 46%, but they dropped by 7 points in a matter of 3 days.
I am shooketh.
I just talked about the tip of the iceberg with all of this. The level of stupidity and danger we've embarked upon is actually quite frightening because we have rational thinking abilities and can see a terrorist when one takes over the country of Afghanistan. But the man who holds the launch codes cannot. For the sake of sanity, please share rationality and this video with your friends and family. Until next time, stay healthy, America.
Joined now by Vicki McKenna for Culturecast. Vicki, culture, one of those things that we like to preserve, one of those things that we like to think we have, Western culture, right? Freedom, liberty, responsibility, sacrifice, love of country. Do we have a culture anymore? What's going on? What happened to civilization in the West?
That is a good question. Do we even have a culture anymore that we could, a shared culture? And I think we do. It's just not shared by our elites. Our elites seem to think that American culture is, globalism is the idea of rejecting logic and rejecting the lessons of history and Western civilization, rejecting philosophy, rejecting God. That's what our elites think culture is. So they go over to Afghanistan, for instance, and they say, you know how we're going to fix your culture, your country? We're going to force you to adopt the exact opposite views of your entire nation's history going back millennia, because we think you should have women's studies professors, or we think you should have a gender studies program, or we think X, Y, or Z. And they plant the flag and call that America, so that when it collapses, the entire world is supposed to believe that American culture itself has collapsed, has failed. But that's not what Western culture is. That's not what Western civilization is meant to prop up. The decline of logic and, anti-intellectualism. That's not what this is about. The problem is the people who still believe in logic and freedom and individual responsibility and choice and deriving our rights from God don't have a voice. And the ones who are supposed to speak for us are either feckless idiots or they're on the take. And that's what's so frustrating about seeing what's happening right now. We are all complicit in the disaster that is going on in Afghanistan right now, with 10,000 American citizens stranded, unable to get to an airport, and even if they could, unlikely to be extracted from that country. We're all complicit in it because we all, none of us stood up and put our foot down in any significant number and said, no, don't do this. Defend American culture, Western culture, before you decide to try to figure out ways, to collapse somebody else's using the exact opposite of the things that give this nation strength.
Yeah, no one in the world is coming here as a refugee seeking out more women's studies courses. No one comes to this country seeking out transgender surgeries for free. No one's coming to this country because they want more onerous government. They don't want that. What they want is what we used to be American civilization: liberty, freedom, the opportunity, the ability to choose to choose your own destiny. That's what America represented. And I really do believe this. I think when you look at a postmodern nation state like the United States with all of its wealth and power, and you look at a third world religious cult, ultimately over time, the cult's going to win out. Because they believe in things that are immutable and eternal. However messed up Islam is worldwide, no matter how incredibly corrupt it is in places like Afghanistan, how twisted it is, nevertheless, there is a deep commitment to family, to children, to the culture. We have nothing like that in America. Everything here is one great, remember back a couple years ago when it was talk to the hand? One great whatever, say the American elites, about our culture. They have no interest in preserving it.
No, and I mean, you began with a question: what is it? Could you get 90 out of 100 Americans to say the exact same thing about American culture? I don't know. But think about the experiment of training the Afghan military to stand up against the Taliban. Training the Afghan military. So we're going to go in there, we're going to teach them to shoot guns. We're going to teach them to use higher tech weapons. We're going to pay them money. And then we're going to tell them to fight the people who are fighting on, under some banner of God, however they conceive of God. You've got people with, what amounts to pitchforks and shovels up against folks with high-tech weaponry, but one group is only doing it for money and the other group is doing it for God. God is going to win every single time, even if you've got a warped idea of what God is. That is why this was never going to happen, and it's why it collapsed so quickly. How did the Afghan military, with $1 trillion in U.S. investment and all of the training that our best and our most talented tactical people gave them, how did they fold like a cheap suit in under 2 days? And it's because they weren't fighting for anything except a paycheck. And when God came around the corner, they thought, I think I'm going to sign up with that guy right there.
After the break, I want to talk about this with relation to the American military, because that right now is one of the grossest examples we have of a country that doesn't even really want to defend itself. We'll talk about this around the corner. Okay, back now with Vicki McKenna for Culturecast. Vicki, we were saying before the break, is there an organization in this, outside of the public schools and the universities, is there an organization in this culture that has decided that Americans were the enemy, not the enemy is the enemy? Is there a more important organization than the United States military whose job should be to defend to the last man, defend to the last trans soldier, right, the freedoms and the liberties of this country and its history and its heritage and its constitution, with the oath they take when they become soldiers? Is there an organization that is more corrupt now in not only betraying the American people, not protecting them, but participating in the unmaking of American civilization?
And I want to be abundantly clear and very, very specific here. When I'm talking about the military, I'm talking about military leadership. I am talking about people who are calling the shots on policy. I am talking about people who are forcing these idiotic, progressive political ideological structures and lenses over everything our military does. And it is very, very dangerous. And we've talked about this before. If you took a look just a few months ago at the release of the Russian recruitment ad for the Russian military, it was all about readiness. It was about pride in nation. It was about toughness. It was about masculinity.
Celebrating testosterone.
Exactly. You could feel the sweat from the commercial. Everybody should look that up. And here we are, and we've got little cartoons about about 5'2", 109-pound women who just want a new adventure so that they can come home and tell their two moms, the neat things they got to do while also getting a free college education out of the whole deal. So yeah, that's a good question. When the military leadership, which by the way created the disaster in Afghanistan, the same clowns who are telling us that the military's number one objective now is to clear the nation of domestic extremists who didn't accept that the election was on the up and up in 2020. We're supposed to trust that these clowns are going to be able to figure out something as complicated as Afghanistan. They're the idiots who got us there in the first place. They're the morons who said what we should do in Afghanistan is try to seat women studies professors and create master's degrees in Marxism in a backward 6th century third world country. These are the exact same people who are saying, what the real goal of the United States military ought to be? It ought to be to get those domestic extremists, those Trump voters out of the military, even though they're the ones who sign up in the first place, and use the military to police the nation of dissent from the elite left-wing orthodoxy. Because if we can do that, if we can be that force that can shut down dissent, then maybe, the clown show, the elitist globalist clown show that is running this country into the dirt, will be able to do it without feeling as if anybody's criticizing them. And it scares the crap out of me because the same people running this military might very well use it against the American people. And when I say use it, I mean besides just looking at our Facebook pages.
Yeah, and just yesterday in the news, there was a leaked course that was being taught to the cadets after some of the higher up said that we're not teaching Marxism. Sure enough, it was released yesterday that certain classes that our young recruits were learning were actually advocating for Marxist ideology. These are kids signed up to fight for the Constitution and American liberty, now being drilled, tested, and forced to see the world through the lens of the communist Chinese, for God's sake.
Look at the world through the lens of our enemies. That they are trying to make the United States military fight on the same side as China.
That's right.
That is insane. And that nobody seems that upset about it. I don't understand it. You've got your grandsons, nephews, and sons in the military, and you should be terrified of this. Look what they were willing to do to young men in Afghanistan, let them get their legs blown off, or in Iraq. And I mean that they're willing to put your boys on top of bombs to be blown up and destroyed in order to promote China's worldview. Are you flipping kidding me? Everybody should be offended. Every veteran should be offended. Every injured war veteran should be outraged. Every parent, every American should be looking at this and saying, this has got to stop. And I'll tell you the word that everybody needs to start talking about, and I know it's a naughty word, and I know it's a really, really scary word, but that word is impeachment. Let's start talking about it.
It is time for some real education. We are celebrating the work of Peter Paul Rubens, born in 1577, died in 1640, one of the great Baroque painters from the Dutch age, the Dutch Empire. The Descent from the Cross is the follow-up picture. Yesterday we looked at the elevation of the cross, Jesus being hoisted up on the cross, the great triptych, image of one of the triptychs from Rubens, and today we're looking at his even more famous and even more justly celebrated Descent of the Cross. Here it is. This painting is one of the most recognizably Rubensian. It is also one of, according to many people, it is his masterpiece. And if you take a look at this picture, you can just see the arrangement of bodies, the motion. It's almost like it is a circle, right? You start with the bare-chested fella up at the top on the left, and just clockwise, just go down and up and back around again. The flow of the picture is magnificent. This is, of course, the Baroque elements of the picture. The dark, gloomy background. It's not quite the black background that we get from Caravaggio, but this painting is very Caravaggisti, right? Caravaggisti in terms of its use of light and dark. The Christ is dead. He is being taken down from the cross. All of nature has rebelled. The sun has been extinguished by an ashy sky, clouds that look more like ink than they do cumulus clouds. And this group of people surrounding reverentially this dead Christ. And notice the weight of Christ. In the Middle Ages and early Renaissance, Christ was very much emaciated. By the time he had died on the cross, he had lost all his blood. Even here, the body of Christ is Rubensian. We talked about Rubenesque, that idea earlier in the week, how the bodies are larger than life. They're fleshy. They're almost defying corporeal reality as we understand it in terms of their fullness. And even in death, even having suffered this horrible fate, the body of Christ, you can see the heaviness of it, the weight of it. It takes so many men and even some women, bottom right-hand corner, for instance, even some women to try to prop up this body before it comes crashing down. This is in death. The kind of suffering we've seen from Jesus here is almost eradicated. And in the typical style of the Caravaggisti, where does the light come from? It comes directly from the body of Christ and that white sheet that's going to be his shroud. He is the central figure. He is the light. All of that darkness around him and all of that horror of crucifixion doesn't seem to really have affected the body much at all. And that's a really beautiful take from all of the other people surrounding him, dressed in dark blacks and greens and grays and blues, with the one figure and the one figure only decked out in red. It really is a masterwork of movement, of depth, of color. This is a great painting from a great painter. All right, just a quick reminder that the very best way to access all of our content is to download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store. It's absolutely free, and you will get access to at least 18 new shows and videos every single week, plus all of our award-winning lectures and animations. And if you enjoy this content, please join our Patreon club. Your tax-deductible donation of $99 will allow us to send you this beautiful tumbler, and you help support our work every day. Simply visit patriotclub.us and we will ship it to you. That's patriotclub.us. Now, we do want to take a final moment to show some love to our Patriot members. Today, we give a great big shout out from Tomas from Hanover, Maryland. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Tomas, Tomas from Hanover, Maryland. Thank you so much, Tomas, for your support. We appreciate it. Send us some crab cakes if you're not too busy. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.